Hi. I promised a few weeks ago that I'd put together at some point a little tutorial on how to use SignalTap with Quartus, or is it Quartus? I'm never quite sure. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to use the Hello World project from my 832 demos repository, mainly because it's small and quick to compile, and I'm going to be using it on the DE10 Lite board. So I've got a serial console here hooked up to it. If I just run the core as it stands, it just spits the hello world down the serial cable to the terminal there where we can capture it. So I'll just clear that, and let's have a look at what's going on inside the core using SignalTap. So we go to Tools, SignalTap Logic Analyzer. Okay, firstly we need to make sure we've got the right USB blaster selected, because if you've got multiple boards you can easily have more than one. Need to make sure the right device on the JTAG chain is selected. We need to choose a clock for our capturing, so if we click the little button there, change the filter to SignalTap Pre-Synthesis. There are various options there. This is the one that makes most sense if we're just starting out. The other option you can use for signals is post-fitting. The advantage of that is it can reduce compile time. The disadvantage is that it makes the signal names quite cryptic sometimes, so for now we won't bother with that. We need to find our clock signal, so we can use a wildcard here. So I'm going to put star CLK star. Okay, these are all signals that have CLK in their path. Includes the PLL, which is the main clock generator, and it has all those clock outputs. I could use those directly if I wanted to. I'm not going to. I'm going to go to my virtual top level, the core itself. I've got clock there which is 100 megahertz, or slow clock there which is 50. I'm going to use the slow clock for now. So there we are, that's now set in there. We need to choose how many samples we're going to take per capture. I'm going to use 1000 for the moment. The more you have there, it says, well, it's actually 1024 because it's, hey, this is a computer. But the more you choose there, the more block RAM you're going to use for capturing. So if you're on a space constrained core or device, then you're going to need to keep that down. Now we need to add some signals. So if we double click in this region here, I'm going to put star CPU star, again use a wildcard to find anything and everything related to the processor within the core. So there's 832 CPU. We're going to capture the address signal, the request signal, the acknowledge signal, the write signal, and the reset signal. That will do for the moment. Right, normally to initiate a capture you would click that button there, and if things aren't set up for capturing yet, it will basically walk you through the next few steps, which is nice. So if I click that, it says the design's changed, do I want to recompile? Yes. So the file has been modified, do we want to save our changes? Yes. So it prompts us for a file name, even suggests one. So just click save. Do I want to enable SignalTap for the current project? Well, yes. And CDF, that's the chain file. Well, we don't need to worry about that, but yes, I will save it. And the CDF is basically just the description of this, how the core and the JTAG interface will upload the core into the FPGA. So yeah, there we are. Quartus is now busily compiling the core. Like I said, I chose this particular core because it's quick to compile. It only takes about a minute, and that's really quite handy because you'll be recompiling a lot when you're using SignalTap. It gets quite a bit more onerous if you're using something like, say, the A0486 core. Anyway, it's nearly done. We can upload the newly compiled core as soon as it's finished the assembling. You don't have to wait for the timing analysis. But in this case I will, because I want to have a look at the fitter report, and if I try and open that up before timing's finished, it just closes it up again when it has finished. So let's have a look. Resource utilization, let's fold these up. Right, we've got the main core project there, the clock generators there, the interface between the SignalTap instance and the JTAG cable, and then the instance itself is there. That's the important bit. You'll see this one's 861 logic elements and 4 memory blocks. The more signals you add to the capture, the larger the logic footprint becomes, and the larger the memory footprint becomes. But if you increase the number of samples, that just increases the memory footprint. So let's make the terminal visible again. Let's run the core again, and there's hello world. So now the CPU has done its thing. It's now sitting in a tight loop. So let's see if we can watch what that loop's doing. Hit the capture button, and here we are. We click the left mouse button to zoom in on the capture, right mouse button to zoom out, and as you can see, what the CPU is doing here is repeatedly reading locations 4 and locations 5. It's actually long word number 4 and number 5 because the address bus only goes down to bit 2, bits 1 and 0 are internal. It's 32-bit CPU. This dotted line here is the capture point. At the moment we don't have any capture triggers set, so that really doesn't mean anything. Well, let's demonstrate that. If we set a capture on the, or trigger on the rising edge of the reset line, since it's active low, and then start a capture, it will wait until I press the reset button on the FPGA board. And there we are. We have basically a little bit of lead in, about 130 samples of lead in I suppose, and then it starts capturing. Actually it's capturing during the lead in as well, but then it shows what happens from our trigger point onwards. And you can see here it reads long word 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and then it reads from the UART register, which is there, to see whether or not it's busy. Reads a couple more long words, and then it writes to the UART register, so that would be the H of hello world. And then it reads from the UART register again, and then it reads from the UART register again, and then it keeps on doing that until the UART's no longer busy. And the UART remains busy until the end of this 1000 signal or 1000 clock long capture, so that's really all we see. So if we wanted to see more than one character being written, what we would do is capture on the rising edge of the right signal, and then we could set up a segmented capture. So if I click segmented there, I can choose, say, 16 64 sample segments, but this requires recompiling because we've changed the structure of the logic analyzer. So if I click the capture button, it prompts me that I've got to save, prompts me that it's been modified, prompts me to save, and now it's started compiling again. So like I say, you'll find yourself recompiling cores a lot if you're using SignalTap, which means it pays to put some thought into exactly what you're going to be watching for and triggering on before you do it. And obviously the more complicated your core, the worse the compile times will be. So there are times when simulation is a much better idea than SignalTap, but for actually catching a bug in the act, it's phenomenally useful. nearly there. Right, let's upload that design into the FPGA. And then we click the capture button. Again, it's waiting because the core's already run and finished and it's not doing any writing at the moment. But if I press the reset button, now it's still not done anything because I've asked for 16 segments and it's waiting for 16 triggers. Hello World doesn't actually have that many characters. So what you can do is click the stop button and it will report however much it's got. So as you can see here, we've got there we are, we've got a right pulse there, we've got another one there, and again we've got a break and then a little bit of lead in before the actual trigger happens, so you get a bit of context, which is nice. And as I say, that's it's captured one for each character we've written to the UART, and then the last few were blank because there was nothing for it to capture. If there had been, then it would have captured the 16 and then reported immediately. Obviously you can add extra signals at this point, so if we wanted to add the D and Q signals, we could do. Oh, the other thing we could add, I suppose, is the where would oh, there it is, byte cell. That's what I'm looking for. And again, recompile. Might as well clear the serial terminal while we're waiting. So yeah, like I said, a lot of recompiling involved in this. And like I said, if we'd used the post-fitting rather than pre-synthesis mode when adding the nodes in the first place, then we could be skipping the analysis and synthesis parts every time we recompile, which again with a logic core it helps a lot, but the downside is, as I say, is that the nodes are more cryptically named, so actually finding the one you're looking for can be trickier. So yeah, nearly there. Okay, that will do. And again, press the reset button and then tell it to stop. There we go. Now where are we? Oh, there we are. Now you see if you look at the Q values coming out of the CPU, for the first write we've got 4.8. For the second one we've got 6.5. Third one we've got 6C. I'm going to guess that the next one's going to be 6C. Yes, indeed. And 6F, and presumably 2.0 for the space. There it is. Yeah. So there we are. You see, we're seeing the actual values being written to the UART. So yeah, that's all quite nice. Like I said, the little dotted lines that you see there, there's a little bit of lead in, then the dotted line where the trigger happens, and then data after the trigger. That's set by the trigger position thing here. We've got pre-trigger set. We can set it to post-trigger. And if I do that and then do a new capture, that doesn't require recompiling, but now we have mostly lead in, then the trigger, and then just a little bit afterwards for context. And there's also a center mode if you want an equal amount of context either side. Oops, I forgot to press the reset button. There we are. So yeah, that's all very handy. Right, one other thing I'll show you before I sign off. I'm going to turn segmented mode off again. I'll turn off that trigger. I'm going to right click on the instance up there and go to enable power up trigger, and I'm going to set a trigger on the rising edge of the right signal, and now I'm going to rebuild, and yes, yet again we've got to recompile. Using this tool on larger projects involves many visits to the kettle. But yes, with the project of this size it's not too bad. So the point of the power up trigger is basically if you want to capture an event that you can't easily trigger externally and that will have happened before you have a chance to click the capture button, power up triggers are very handy. I mean, if you've got a problem like, say, you've got a ROM in a block RAM and it's getting corrupted somehow, then you want to see that happening immediately when you power on the core, instead of waiting for you to press a reset button, because the damage will already have been done by then. So as usual, we'll set the programming going, and now if we tell it to do a capture, the first capture that comes back in this blue colour, and as you can see, what it's basically done is waited until the right signal goes high for the first time and then done a capture. And if I click the button again, it just does a regular capture, and the regular capture has different triggers. You can set that separately from the power up trigger, which is handy. So you double click that if you want to go to the power up trigger and change its triggers, but you have to then recompile if you do change them. Then double click the line above it if you want to go back to the regular capture. So yeah, there we are. That's a brief crash course in using SignalTap. I hope you found that useful. Do ask me questions if you have any, and maybe I'll do some more tutorials at some point. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.